Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of That Other Review Show. Finally, we're a little late on this one, but we finally witnessed the sequel to The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and we loved it. Now, before you go on hating us, here's our review.
It's That Other Review Show, brought to you by Two Black Labs Audio and A Week in Geekdom.
By the way, massive spoilers from here on out, folks. I will spoil everything about this movie, so if you've not seen it, go watch it and then come back. Yes, folks, the much talked about sequel is finally in theaters, and we had a chance to view it, and for once, almost everybody in our crew loved it, and myself included. I sincerely don't know what all the hating was all about. I thought it was fantastic. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it is amazing in and of itself. The movie has everything: action, intrigue, romance, and I loved every single bit. One of the main complaints from basically anybody reviewing it was that, the movie tries to juggle too much at the same time. All the characters, I ended up not caring about X or Y character. It was a little bit too lovey-dovey. And Electro's character not being fleshed out a little bit more or given a proper time to shine because of Harry Osborn, which in this movie turns out to be Green Goblin. I thought that maybe his introduction was a little bit rushed. I wouldn't say forced, because we kind of saw this coming, specifically, with the ending scenes, which were so dramatic and just heart-wrenching. Literally, the whole theater gasped at that scene at the end. But, I believe before we even started shooting video, we were doing the podcast, and we were kind of hoping the ending to the sequel would happen, and yes, it happened. It has to happen. It is the character-defining moment for Spider-Man. After this story, he becomes, the hero that we all know and love from the comic books. And speaking of comic books, it was literally watching a comic book come to life. It was like the best action-packed Spidey yet. From Rhino to Electro, Green Goblin, and all the little characters, cameos like Alistair Smythe, Felicia Hardy. The list goes on, even, he didn't actually appear himself, but JJ, Jonah Jameson finally showing up, quote unquote. I thought that was pretty cool as well. Rhino. Some people actually did not like him. I thought he was perfectly suited for his role in this movie. He was basically cannon fodder, and let's face it, other than flowers for Rhino and Rhino in Grim Hunt, the character has not had like a epic story where you realize like this is like an uber badass villain for Spidey. He's always been that forceful baddie that's always there at Spider-Man's grievance, I guess. But yes, I thought it was handled perfectly. The parts where Alexei was on screen with Paul Giamatti, I thought it was pretty funny. I liked the opening scene. I was not a big fan of the shaky cam at first, but thank God is just that part only. Later on in the movie, when you finally see the Rhino, at first I thought, Mecha Rhino, I don't know how to feel about this. But in retrospect, I think this is basically a more bestial form of the Ultimate version, where it's just a guy inside a suit of armor. Electro, the character's origins are a little bit different. They're more in line with, of course, it reminded me a lot, actually, of Spectacular Spider-Man, which we solemnly miss. It reminded me of that show where Max fell into the tub with the electric eels. It was basically the same thing, only in the cartoon show he was working with Kurt Connors, and this one he's working strictly for Oscorp. It's easy for you to sympathize with the character because he's such an outcast, a loner in the worst possible way, and really comes off the screen as more of just like some crazy otaku person for a specific thing, in this case Spider-Man. But when he actually turns into the character of Electro, I thought it was pretty cool. He was a little bit paranoid, a little bit schizophrenic, and just well, I guess he never got a chance to like go full out fighting with our hero, but the scenes that he was on blew me away. I mean, I was basically watching an animated series or reading one of many countless battles that both characters have been in over 50 years of Spider-Man history. Side note, the Electro suite song. Man, that song kicks ass. I had to get that song ASAP from the soundtrack. The character of Harry Osborn, I thought Dean DeHaan played him beautifully. I loved Harry Osborn in this movie. It's one of my favorite interpretations of the character. One thing I did not really like was what they ended up doing with Norman Osborn. But if we know our comic book history and if we know our characters, I'm sure he'll be back in some shape or form. I mean, just look at them fingers and stuff. I'm pretty sure main Gobby will be showing up eventually. If not, then I just wasted this sentence. But yes, Harry did a fantastic job. I love that basically he really followed in his father's footsteps in terms of the douchery, because, my God. One of the things I loved about the movie, of course, with all these Easter eggs and cameos, was the world building. And it's totally different from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that we're just world building based on one hero and his huge arsenal of villains. Because unlike Iron Man and Cap and Thor, Hulk, and all these guys, Spidey's out on his own, and he's got one of the finest rogues gallery in the Marvel world. This movie, although technically we had 3 villains, I guess, with the added presence of Alistair Smythe and the potential of Black Cat being in there. This movie was jam-packed with characters, and like every Spider-Man comic book, he's known to handle so many characters at the same time. I was not bothered by this at all, and I asked people that were not Spider-Man fans, or they just watched the movies and that was it. I asked them, how did you feel about having so many characters? And most of them just simply said, I thought it was cool, and it was not convoluted in the slightest. I don't get why people were criticizing that, oh, well, it's no Spider-Man 3 by any chance of the imagination of the old trilogy, but this handled all the multiple threads at the same time, I guess. It handled it pretty well. Speaking of that, poor Gwen Stacy, finally, after months and years of speculation, yes, Gwen met her ultimate demise in this movie, and seriously, it was great in the sense that if you love your comic book mythology, it followed up one of the quintessential Spider-Man stories of all time, Amazing Spider-Man. We basically saw with the first 2 movies the death of the Stacys. So now the stage is set for the introduction of Mary Jane Watson, of course the Sinister Six, which I'll get to in a minute, and potential Amazing Spider-Man sequels, because we already know everybody signed on for at least 2 more Amazing Spider-Man movies. And we also are getting a Venom and, of course, the Sinister Six spin-off. So it's a lot of Spidey to go around. Now, near the end of the movie, we finally learned who the man in the shadows was. The gentleman, of course, is working with Harry, and they are working towards a common goal, which is to defeat Spider-Man. And what better way than to make up a little party, a little team, I guess, of the Sinister Six. 6 of Spidey's most infamous villains, which right now I am guessing, and judging by the credits of the movie itself, Chameleon, Kraven, Rhino, Ock, Vulture, and, of course, Green Goblin himself, and you have your 6 right there. Do I expect Electro to survive? Yes. Because, let's face it, electricity never really dies. It just goes off into another direction. And, yeah, he burst out into tiny pieces, I guess, of electricity. But he could just reassemble in a later time, I guess. That's never stopped him. I mean, if you read the comic books, Thor threw that guy up in space. That's even worse. And he came back. They always come back. And one of the things that bugged me a little bit was, of course, I will say, yes, the storyline with the Parkers was a little bit overly dramatic when you finally learned what they were running from. And, well, I guess the commercials are to blame, because I remember the promos. They made a huge deal out of this. And in retrospect, it didn't really matter that much. Yes, it was important, and yes, it related to Spider-Man's origin and Peter and all that stuff, but it wasn't like the whole movie depended on this one big secret. So I'm guessing, I would have preferred another method of introducing the Parker origins, I guess. I would have liked the ultimate approach with the Venom suit, but that's for another movie. Now, where do we go from here? That's the big question. Amazing Spider-Man 3, the sky's the limit. I mean, you've already done so much. Now we're getting Mary Jane Watson. Will it be Shailene Woodley? I think so. It should be her. If not, I'm okay with whomever you're casting. But I will say, you kind of shot yourself in the foot, because after the amazing chemistry with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, I just think people are not going to warm up a little bit to MJ and Peter, because let's face it, a lot of people are just watching it and not getting themselves involved with the comic book world. So yeah, they could it'd be kind of interesting to see how the audience would react, after such a powerful ending to Amazing Spider-Man 2. One of the other aspects that I really loved for a sequel, Amazing Spider-Man 3, if you're already going to introduce Kraven the Hunter and you've got MJ, straight up, Amazing Spider-Man 3 could very well be Kraven's last hunt. And I think it would be an amazing opportunity to do such a cool and dark, twisted Spider-Man story. But yeah, the movie, did I love it? Hell yes. It's a fine addition to the Spider-Man catalog. Is it a perfect movie? It has its little issues. And like I said, I'm just a little upset with so many negative reviews. I thought the movie did a fantastic job. I'm actually more interested in seeing a director's cut of this movie, because if you look at the trailers, a lot of scenes were left out. And of course, Mary Jane was cut out from the movie, which is understandable considering what happens at the end of the flick. But I'm really interested to see all these scenes that were not there and just how the movie would fare in that form. I'm also really interested in knowing about that post-credit scene that was cut out. Because let's face it, I was not a big fan of the X-Men promo that they tackled in. Because I remember when the story came out and people were like, oh, this could mean like they're open to the idea of a crossover. And no, it just was a playful tease, I guess. Like, hey, go watch X-Men while you're at it. I really did not give a crap about it. I would rate it 100 out of 1,000 awesomeness. Because let's face it, other shows, they'll give out stars or points or numbers. I don't care. That's them. This is that other review show, and I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 is quite possibly one of, if not the best Spider-Man movie ever. There, I said it. Sue me. I know Spider-Man 2 was awesome. The first one was corny. Number 3 sucked as hell. Amazing Spider-Man 1 was actually fun. This one has everything you're looking for in a Spider-Man movie. Spidey looks amazing. The 3D, the action, the scenes, the villains, the love interest. It has it all. It's just a fun time, I guess. So, yeah, subscribe via YouTube, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. So thank you so much.
Remember to subscribe, or you can like and follow us on social media, or just follow us on our main website. That's aweekingeekdom.com.
It's a washing machine.